All righty, welcome back to the program. It's the Vicki McKenna Show. And standing by in the Middleton Ford hotline, family-owned and your good neighbor Ford dealership for nearly 75 years, is Mark Mix from the National Right to Work Foundation. Boy, I don't think I ever thought you and I'd be talking about the end of Act 10. You were here. You helped out back in 2011. You were part of the team that fought for worker freedom in Wisconsin. And then you helped us out on right to work. And here we are potentially facing the end of that historic reform, which is, has saved Wisconsinites billions of dollars. I mean, $27 billion is a lot of money. But it potentially, just goes the way of the dinosaur. I'm not sure if there's a way to get it in front of a federal court, but my suspicion is no.
Well, Vicki, obviously the unions decided that a federal court venue was appropriate back in 2011 when they challenged it. They filed duplicate cases, one in federal court in Seventh Circuit. It was upheld there. And then, of course, the Wisconsin Supreme Court, after, 3 years of deliberation, I think, decided to uphold it there, too. And, Vicki, the really key thing here is the 14th Amendment question of equal protection. And that was basically adjudicated in the federal court case and in the Supreme Court case before the Washington Supreme Court. But now this Judge Frost has found a way to bisect the public safety exemption that was in the bill and saying that because you didn't include all public safety workers, that the equal protection provision is going to strike the whole thing down. Wisconsin has a general severability clause in all their legislation, and the easiest thing to do would be, okay, we're going to eliminate the exemption and Act 10 would continue. But this is politics. This is power politics, and this is about a union leadership, but, the union bosses of Wisconsin saying, sooner or later we're going to get our power back, and this was the first step in doing that.
Yeah. So you could have eliminated the exemption. That's a judge had that option since there's severability.
Yep.
But no, we're not going to do that. We're going to throw the whole law out. Now, this isn't, yesterday I was talking about this when the story broke. This will not force public employees into the union. We have Janus. We have that case out there that presumably protects all the public employees. Or am I wrong?
No, we think so. I mean, this ruling takes the Wisconsin law all the way back to pre-Act 10. So basically, force fees were part of the provisions. Dues deduction was part of that as well. So the question about the force fees, I think, is pretty well settled. They can't, based on the Janus decision, go back. I guess they could go back to public safety employees who were exempted, and get them to pay again. But it doesn't make any sense they would go back. The Janus case is a First Amendment case, as we've talked about before, that protects all government workers at every level of government from being forced to pay dues or fees. So that part will stick. But the rest of it, to your point, Vicki, $27 billion, at least in a state government, that's a lot of money. And the taxpayers of Wisconsin ought to see through this for what it is. This case was heavily adjudicated. It was litigated. It was upheld. And now, with power politics and the change in the Supreme Court makeup, which has implications, it's pretty clear that they're going to get their power back. And dues deduction may be part of that equation again. If these workers, the school districts will say, we got to start collecting money from members again, and the government will be back in the business of collecting money. There's still a fight ahead.
Yeah, yep. and the rigged game of sliding dollars to your health insurer, your union created health insurance company, making them wealthy in the process. I mean, this whole the whole corrupt scheme is coming back. The only thing potentially positive you can say is that union workers, or rather public employees that don't want to be members of the union, won't have to be and won't be forced to pay dues because of a Supreme Court case that National Right to Work litigated successfully called Janus. I don't know if we don't have the same legislature we used to have either, so I'm not expecting anything tough from those guys. This could be really, really devastating to the Wisconsin economy. It really could be. I mean, is everything, gets great because of Trump's victory, and then, MAGA passes Wisconsin by as we slouch toward Minnesota. It's very terrifying. But I do want to ask, though, I'm generally very, very pleased with Trump's nominees. Very pleased. But I know you talked with Matt Kittle about this, but what on earth is going on with Labor Secretary? My first question to you, though, is what power does the Labor Secretary have? Is it something that we should really be worried about? This is a woman who supported the PRO Act. We'll get into that in a sec. But what kind of power would she have as Labor Secretary?
Well, I think the first thing to consider is the redefinition of independent contractors to employees. That was a rule that was promulgated under this acting secretary, Julie Su, that will be sitting in front of this new nominee if she's confirmed, and there will be an attempt probably to roll that back. And we'll see, because to your point, Vicki, the PRO Act includes that redefinition of independent contractors to employees. And as you know, you can't unionize independent contractors, but you can unionize employees. So that's what the union hook is on this. And so she will be confronted with that as Secretary of Labor. She also has the ability to spend what is about $14 billion in discretionary money. That little kitty's been used to empower union officials across the country, like, the idea of OSHA inspections, surprise OSHA inspections, bringing along union organizers. That's a DOL policy. The ability to fund registered apprenticeship programs. I'm using my finger quotes. You can't see that. But registered means union apprenticeship programs, and basically denying any kind of funding for, merit shop apprenticeship programs, which are trying to train people how to frame houses and build things. And, the unions have basically benefited dramatically from literally millions and millions and millions of dollars of federal taxpayer money directed only to these union apprenticeship programs. And so there's a lot of money there. It's about a $70 billion agency with 15,000 full-time equivalent employees. Whether or not they use increased union power negotiating over the employment base of the Secretary of Labor that work for the Labor Department, that's another question. Her positions on several issues run counter to many things that Donald Trump has talked about.
It's amazing. It's a sop. Yeah. It's a sop, and you really it's hard to point to too many of his picks that are just pure sops. She is a sop to Sean O'Brien. She is a sop to the Teamsters withholding their endorsement of Kamala Harris. Not that I think the Teamsters endorsement would have mattered in any way to the outcome of the election, but that's what this feels like. This is a Republican who is anti-right to work. She's not really a Republican in any way we can tell, but she's anti-right to work. She was a co-sponsor of the PRO Act. She was one of the handful of Republicans that sponsored the PRO Act, and the PRO Act would eliminate right to work protections nationally and would obliterate independent contractors. The gig economy would be dead because nobody can afford to employ all the people who are independent contractors now. A lot of these companies rely on the fact that they don't have to pay those kinds of taxes for employees because they're independent contractors. And that's her background. But you're telling me she's got a lot of power as labor secretary, and she could be very dangerous.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, she's running a major federal agency. Unless she's been tasked with devolving it, which I don't think she has based on her resume, we're being told now that, the whispers coming out of the transition office are like, well, you'll be really pleased with the second in command, but she's still going to be the Secretary of Labor. And to your point, Vicki, this is basically saying, Sean O'Brien, here's the favor. Thank you for being a friend.
Payoff.
But he's thanking him for not endorsing Kamala Harris and not endorsing him. Sean O'Brien knew, and we've talked about this, in their internal polling, he's now admitted publicly that 62% of the Teamsters that were polled about who they were going to support for president said they were going to vote for Donald Trump. And so Sean O'Brien did the really courageous thing and didn't endorse anyone. That's really crazy. And Randy Weingarten has now said the Secretary of Labor pick is a great choice. Elizabeth Warren now says she supports this Labor Secretary nominee. So this is the wrong team saying they're all in favor of who this is going to be.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And not to mention, I guess, in thinking about the kind of mischief that can be done just through the Labor Department. I was kind of hoping you were going to tell me, they're kind of a paper tiger, but no, they just do have too much power. What on the independent contractor question though, that's a rule that was promulgated by the Labor Department. So independent contractors are on the verge right now of being written out without an empowering piece of legislation even, and she would be the one to decide whether or not that rule goes forward.
Yeah, she would have some control over that. In fact, I think the rule was issued, at the end of August. And so there is a Congressional Review Act provision that may exist where the Congress may get to vote on this. But it literally, how many days these people stay in during this lame duck session could eliminate the CRA possibility. So it will be up to her to go back and say, you know what, we look at this again, we want to do something different. But then again, Vicki, that takes a couple of years to get through that process. So it's not a good situation. And it doesn't make any sense. There's lots of people out there that could be very, very appropriate as secretaries of labor. In fact, one, Pat Pizzella, who was the acting secretary under Trump's first administration, understands these issues very, very well. He was out there. His name was being circulated. And all of a sudden, apparently, Sean O'Brien makes a phone call to Donald Trump, and the next thing you know, we have Lori Chavez-DeRemer as the potential Secretary of Labor.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, what I'm hoping and what I'm getting told is that they're hoping to kill it. That the people understand, that the people like Ron Johnson are hoping Trump rescinds this nomination. And if he doesn't rescind this nomination, that there's enough resistance in the way of Republicans, at least, to force a different nominee. I just think
you got 51 Republican votes, Vicki? I don't think you do. You got 47 Democrat votes. So they only need four Republicans to cross over. I mean, it is very. And now you had senators coming out, like Tommy Tuberville from Alabama came out today, said, look, I don't like your position on several issues, but I'm going to give Trump the benefit of the doubt. Bill Cassidy, the chairman of the committee, said, we're going to have a robust questioning about why she won't let Louisiana maintain their right to work law, but I'm willing to proceed. And the ratio on that committee of jurisdiction on her nomination will be 1 seat. And Susan Collins of Maine is going to be on that committee. So it's unlikely that if all the Democrats vote for her, there'll be no way to stop her, one way, in committee or on the floor of the United States Senate.
You know, the idea that you would want to put someone in it's saying that the undersecretary is going to be great. I mean, the buck stops with her. So if the undersecretary does things that she doesn't like, she just simply tells the undersecretary not to do that any longer. So that's irrelevant. That only matters when you've got the secretary and the undersecretary working toward a similar, to an identical purpose. Then the undersecretary matters. You know, that's why the deputy director of the FBI is going to matter a lot for Kash Patel, because they're going to be working toward the exact same purpose. If you've got people working at cross purposes, the buck stops with the secretary.
Yeah, that's my point, too. I mean, other people say that. And I think because the pressure's building and the awareness of this nomination is building, I think they had to kind of put out there to the media, don't worry, we'll have a great number 2 and a great number 3, and she won't be involved in any of the operations.
That's nonsense.
To your point, Vicki, I said the same thing. She's the Secretary of Labor.
Last question for you. If this independent contractor rule goes through, and again, that turns all independent contractors into employees. And so a lot of you are just going to lose your jobs because the people you work for won't be able to afford you as a proper employee. Do you see a pathway to challenge that in court as an organization?
Yeah, I do, and I think there's you can litigate anything, and by the way, we're gonna be involved in the Act 10 litigation too. I've just talked to our legal director about it. He's got 2 lawyers working on our amicus brief in the appeal if it comes forward. So, but yeah, I think so. Look, it's got to be challenged, and the independent contractors group is just adamant about their opposition to this because of this bill and the rule. So there's going to be a lot more to be said about it, but it's just unfortunate that we have a situation where we can celebrate a dramatic change in the American political process, and yet when we come back to Washington, things kind of look exactly the same. Not exactly the same.
Not exactly the same, but in this particular instance, it looks exactly the same. Mark Mix, National Right to Work Foundation, National Right to Work Committee, thank you so much for joining me on the program today.
Thanks, Vicki.
Always great to have you on the show.